Welcome the anointed ones. There are some people you don't attack because they won't chase you. They'll outlive you. Let that sit for a second. History is very clear on one uncomfortable fact. People who move quietly, act ethically, and refuse to play dirty are often mistaken for easy targets. Psychologists call this a misattribution of calm, when emotional regulation is confused for passivity. It's one of the oldest miscalculations in human behavior, and it's the reason certain people end up destroying themselves while believing they're in control the entire time. This story is about that mistake, because when you mess with someone who is divinely guided, an earth angel who doesn't announce themselves, doesn't threaten, doesn't posture, you're not stepping into a fight. You're stepping into a long-term consequence you didn't budget for. These are the kind of people who don't react fast, but reality reacts for them. And by the time it does, everyone suddenly remembers who started it. Here's the part that never gets talked about. Most betrayals don't come from strength, they come from insecurity. People don't target earth angels because they're weak. They target them because their presence exposes cracks, moral, psychological, spiritual cracks. So instead of fixing themselves, they try to eliminate the reminder. Spoiler alert, that never works. You can't bully integrity out of existence. What makes this even more ironic, and honestly a little embarrassing, is that the very traits they mocked ended up being the reason they lost. The patience they laughed at became timing. The empathy they exploited became discernment. The silence they underestimated became documented truth. It's like watching someone trip over a rake they placed themselves repeatedly and still blaming the ground. This isn't a revenge story, it's a pattern story, one that repeats across families, workplaces, friendships, and spiritual communities. Every time someone mistakes a divinely guided soul for a pushover, the outcome is the same. They don't just lose the person, they lose their reputation, their footing, and their narrative, slowly, publicly, permanently. So if you've ever wondered how people manage to completely play themselves while thinking they're winning, stay right here. This isn't about shouting back. It's about what happens when truth, timing, and divine alignment quietly take the wheel, and let arrogance do the rest. Number 1. They mistook your restraint for weakness and exposed their own darkness. What really happened is simple but uncomfortable to admit. You didn't react the way they expected. You didn't explode, didn't start screaming your side of the story, didn't rush to defend your name. And because they only understand loud reactions, they decided you were weak. That assumption gave them permission, in their minds, to go further. Say more, do more. Cross lines they would have never crossed if they thought you were capable of real consequence. Your restraint wasn't fear. It was self-control. It was awareness. You were watching the whole thing play out, not emotionally drowning in it. While they were escalating, you were noticing patterns. Who spoke when? Who stayed silent? Who switched stories? Who got nervous when certain topics came up? You weren't frozen. You were collecting information without letting them know you were doing it. Here's where they really played themselves. People who operate from insecurity can't stand calm. Calm feels like judgment to them. Your composure made them uneasy, so they kept poking, hoping to get a reaction that would justify their behavior. Instead, they gave you evidence. Texts, witnesses, slips of the tongue, contradictions. They told on themselves without realizing it, because they assumed you weren't sharp enough to catch it. What they didn't understand is that restraint is often the last stage before clarity. You weren't undecided. You were deciding precisely how much access they would lose. Every time you chose not to react, they felt bolder, and that boldness exposed parts of them they worked hard to keep hidden. Envy, cruelty, control issues, the need to dominate someone they thought wouldn't fight back. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't need drama to stand. It stood on facts, consistency, and time. That's why the fallout hit them harder than they expected. They thought you were silent because you had nothing. In reality, you were quiet because you had everything you needed. They didn't lose because you attacked them. They lost because they underestimated the power of someone who knows exactly who they are and doesn't need to prove it. Number 2. They tried to exploit your empathy and accidentally activated your discernment. They came in assuming your heart was an open door. They saw how you listened, how you gave people the benefit of the doubt, how you didn't rush to judge. To them, that looked like an opportunity. They figured they could lie a little, twist a story here and there, lean on your compassion when it suited them, and disappear when it didn't. They thought empathy meant you would always excuse bad behavior. That was their first mistake. Empathy didn't make you blind. It made you attentive. You noticed the emotional tone behind the words. You felt when something didn't line up, even if you couldn't explain it right away. Your body caught what your mind hadn't named yet. The pauses that felt off, the explanations that were too detailed, the apologies that didn't change anything. You weren't suspicious, you were aware. As they kept pushing, your empathy stopped being a bridge and became a filter. You started separating pain from manipulation, honesty from performance. You could feel when someone was hurting and when someone was using hurt as a tool. That shift changed everything. The more they tried to pull on your heartstrings, the more obvious the strings became. They thought emotional stories would soften you. Instead, patterns hardened. You started recognizing cycles instead of moments. Promises followed by the same behavior. Regret followed by repetition. Charm followed by avoidance. Empathy allowed you to stay present long enough to see the whole loop, not just the part designed to make you feel guilty. What really unsettled them was that you didn't turn cold. You turned clear. You didn't lash out or shame them. You simply stopped absorbing what wasn't yours to carry. And when you stopped absorbing, their power disappeared. People who manipulate through emotion need you confused, overgiving and doubting yourself. Discernment starves that dynamic. In the end, they didn't lose access because you became harsh. They lost access because you became honest with yourself. You still cared. You just cared with boundaries. And that kind of empathy can't be exploited. It sees too much, feels too deeply, and protects itself without apology. Number 3. They underestimated the intelligence behind your softness. Softness is often mistaken for naivety, for lack of strategy, for weakness. That's exactly what they assumed about you. They thought someone who doesn't dominate every conversation, someone who doesn't shout over every disagreement, someone who handles situations calmly is easy to manipulate. They thought they could push, provoke, and even humiliate you without consequence. That assumption was their first and biggest mistake. The truth is that your softness isn't a flaw. It's a form of intelligence. It's deliberate. It allows you to observe without interference, to understand motives without confrontation, and to calculate responses without emotion clouding judgment. While they were acting impulsively, trying to bait you into a fight, you were quietly analyzing every word, every action, every inconsistency. You weren't blind. You were hyper-aware, cataloging behavior and waiting for patterns to emerge. Their overconfidence led them to speak freely, to reveal intentions, secrets, and weaknesses they never would have admitted around someone they considered equally cunning. Every boast, every lie, every attempt to intimidate became a breadcrumb trail. They didn't realize that their attempts to dominate you were giving you insight into their own character, their own vulnerabilities, and their own limits. In trying to control you, they were handing you the keys to understand them fully. Softness doesn't mean absence of power. It means power that isn't flaunted, power that observes before acting, power that knows when to step back and let consequences unfold naturally. And when they finally realized that you weren't reacting the way they expected, panic set in. Their moves became sloppy, desperate, and self-revealing. Every manipulation, every false narrative, every attempt to bend reality backfired because they had underestimated what it meant to be patient, aware, and strategically kind. They mistook your restraint for vulnerability, and in doing so, they exposed themselves. Your softness was never weakness. It was the quiet kind of intelligence that doesn't need to shout to win. By the time they recognized it, the damage was already done. They had lost, and they didn't even fully understand how it happened. Number 4, they triggered a divine recalibration they can't undo. They thought they were applying pressure to break you, stress you out, confuse you, wear you down until you doubted yourself and folded. What they didn't understand is that pressure doesn't destroy someone who's aligned, it reorganizes them. The moment they crossed a certain line, something shifted in you that can't be reversed. You didn't just get stronger, you got clearer. Before that point, you tolerated things you shouldn't have. You explained yourself too much. You gave grace where accountability was needed. Their behavior forced a correction, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. And that's where the recalibration began. Your values sharpened. Your boundaries became non-negotiable. Your energy stopped leaking into people and situations that were never meant to hold it. What makes this divine is that it didn't feel dramatic while it was happening. It felt quiet, subtle. One day you realized certain things no longer triggered you. Certain people no longer had access to your emotions. Certain conversations no longer felt necessary. That's not numbness. That's alignment. When someone pushes an earth angel too far, the universe doesn't punish loudly. It adjusts positioning. They can't undo it because you can't unsee what you saw. You now recognize manipulation in real time. You sense when something is off before words are even spoken. You move differently. You respond less. You observe more. And that new frequency makes old tactics useless. What used to get a reaction now gets indifference. What used to control you now bores you. Meanwhile, they're stuck dealing with the version of you they helped create but no longer have access to. They can apologize, explain, rewrite history. It doesn't matter. The recalibration already happened. You're not angry. You're unavailable. And that's what they feel most. They wanted to dominate the situation. Instead, they activated your sovereignty. They wanted to humble you. Instead, they clarified you. And the hardest part for them is knowing there's no reset button. You don't go back to who you were before the line was crossed. You move forward as someone who understands their worth, trusts their instincts, and answers to nothing that disrupts their alignment. Number 5. They tried to isolate you and ended up isolating themselves. Isolation was their game plan. They wanted to make you feel alone, cut off from support, and doubting your own instincts. They thought that if they could control the narrative, manipulate relationships, and plant seeds of distrust, they could corner you. That was their strategy. What they didn't account for is that trying to suffocate someone who is divinely aligned always backfires. You didn't panic. You didn't lash out. You didn't start pulling strings to fight back. Instead, you stayed rooted in truth and integrity. Every time they whispered, plotted, or tried to rewrite reality, you simply observed. You kept showing up as yourself, consistent and steady. People around you noticed. People watching from the sidelines noticed. And slowly, quietly, their network started to shrink, while yours, built on honesty and authenticity, held firm. By attempting to isolate you, they exposed their own character. Their manipulations, their fear, their obsession to control everything around them became obvious to everyone else. Instead of alienating you, they alienated themselves. Friends and allies who might have been neutral before saw the truth in how they behaved. They saw desperation, insecurity, and cruelty. Those who initially gave them benefit of the doubt began to distance themselves. What's remarkable is that isolation isn't just a physical state, it's an energetic one. By trying to trap you, they sent out signals of negativity that repelled support instead of attracting it. Meanwhile, your presence, calm and aligned, became a magnet for the right energy and the right people. Their own fear and aggression created a bubble around them that no one wanted to penetrate. In the end, they didn't just fail at isolating you. They showcased their weakness in full view. Their attempts to control access to you became a mirror reflecting their own instability. While they tightened their grip, the world around them loosened, and they were left standing alone. The irony is sharp. The very act they hoped would crush you only highlighted their emptiness. By trying to cage a divinely guided earth angel, they became the ones trapped in isolation, exposed and powerless. Number 6. They exposed their fear by how aggressively they targeted you. Everything they did screamed fear, even if they thought it looked like power. The intensity, the urgency, the way they attacked, it wasn't confidence, it was panic dressed up as dominance. People who operate from a place of genuine control don't need to overextend themselves, don't need to escalate constantly, and don't feel compelled to convince the world they're right. Fear, on the other hand, is loud, desperate, and obvious, and that's exactly what they revealed by targeting you. They wanted to intimidate you, overwhelm you, and make you question your own judgment. They believed that sheer aggression would mask their own insecurities. But the more they tried to dominate, the more their true state became visible. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to corner you was a broadcast of their internal panic. They thought they were moving strategically, but the truth is that fear drives mistakes, and they were living proof of that principle. What they didn't account for is that targeting a divinely guided earth angel only magnifies the effect of their own insecurity. You didn't crumble. You didn't retaliate blindly. You held your space, maintained your integrity, and watched their behavior unfold. The more they pushed, the more they overexposed themselves. Every lie, every exaggeration, every desperate justification became evidence of their instability. Their fear became their signature. And the irony is brutal. While they were trying to dominate and control you, they were undermining their own credibility. People around them noticed the energy shift, the desperation, the inconsistencies, the way they flinched at accountability. Their fear didn't stay hidden, it leaked everywhere, turning their attacks into self-sabotage. By the time reality caught up, it wasn't your reaction that defeated them. It was their own fear manifesting as aggression. They misread strength for weakness, calm for ignorance, and empathy for vulnerability. The more they acted out of fear, the more they revealed exactly who they were, and in doing so, they ensured that their plans, their narratives, and their attacks all collapsed under the weight of their own exposed insecurity. Number 7. They thought spiritual people don't fight back, and miscalculated badly. They assumed that because you operate from a higher frequency, because you move with clarity and grace, you would remain passive in the face of attacks. They believed that spirituality equals vulnerability, that kindness equals compliance, and that calm equals weakness. That assumption couldn't have been further from the truth. What they didn't realize is that someone who is aligned, centered, and guided doesn't react recklessly. They respond with strategy, precision, and timing that feels almost invisible until it's too late. They tried to provoke a reaction, thinking that anger or confrontation would destabilize you. They expected drama, noise, and emotional chaos. Instead, they got observation, patience, and discernment. Every attempt to manipulate, deceive, or intimidate became a window into their own motives. While they were busy playing their game, you were quietly cataloging behavior, patterns, and inconsistencies. Their energy was loud and messy. Yours was steady and intentional, and that contrast was their undoing. They failed to understand that spiritual alignment doesn't mean inaction, it means controlled action. You didn't need to fight on their terms. You didn't need to respond to every jab or counter every lie. You allowed reality, timing, and your own integrity to do the work. Every misstep they made, every overreach, every slip of the tongue became self-incrimination. Their assumption that spirituality equals passivity became the very thing that exposed them. What terrifies manipulators the most is not revenge. It's truth manifesting quietly but unmistakably. Your clarity revealed their distortions. Your boundaries, maintained without aggression, dismantled their control. Your presence, calm yet firm, highlighted their instability. And while they were scrambling to regain a sense of dominance, they had already lost the battle they thought they were winning. By miscalculating you, they activated forces they had no plan for: discernment, timing, and the kind of quiet strength that can't be bullied. They underestimated that someone who is spiritually aligned fights differently, not with noise or chaos, but with inevitability. And when the dust settles, the record doesn't lie. They thought they could win, but their own misjudgment guaranteed their defeat. Number 8. They attempted to control the outcome and lost control of themselves. They came in thinking they could orchestrate everything, manipulate every move, and bend reality to fit their version of the story. Every conversation, every interaction, every subtle influence was part of a grand plan in their mind. They believed that by pushing, pressuring, and micromanaging, they could steer you, corner you, and ultimately shape the outcome in their favor. What they didn't realize is that control is a fragile illusion, and the more desperately they tried to hold on to it, the faster it slipped through their fingers. Their obsession with controlling you consumed them. They became reactionary, defensive, and unpredictable. Every action was calculated, but each one created unintended consequences. Every manipulation left traces. Every lie required another lie to support it. The tighter they gripped, the more their own energy unraveled. Their behavior started to mirror panic disguised as authority. What was meant to dominate turned into a spectacle of self-destruction. Meanwhile, you moved with detachment. You didn't try to manipulate them back. You didn't over-explain, and you didn't exhaust yourself in proving anything. You simply existed within your own alignment. Your calmness, your consistency, your refusal to participate in their chaos slowly stripped them of control. The world, circumstances, and even other people began reflecting back the truth. The outcome you needed didn't require force, it required presence. And presence is something no one can manufacture or intimidate. Their attempt to dominate backfired because it exposed a glaring contrast. They were frantic. You were deliberate. They were reactive. You were discerning. They were entangled in a web of their own making, while you moved forward unshaken. Every push they made, every pressure point they applied, became evidence of their unraveling, not yours. By trying to control someone divinely aligned, they revealed the truth about themselves. They thought they were steering the ship, but in reality they were sinking it. And while they flailed trying to recover, you remained untouchable, steady, and inevitable. The irony is sharp and undeniable. In their attempt to dominate, they became the ones completely out of control. Number 9. They confused your patience with permission. They thought because you didn't react immediately, because you took your time observing, because you maintained your composure, that you were giving them free rein. They believed silence and restraint meant consent, that your patience was a green light for them to push boundaries, lie, manipulate, and escalate without consequence. That was their fatal mistake. Patience is not permission. Patience is strategy. It's a deliberate pause that allows clarity to emerge, mistakes to reveal themselves, and truth to take its course. Every time they overstepped, you weren't unaware. You were calculating. You were watching the patterns, noticing the repeated behaviors, measuring the depth of deception. They assumed they were invisible, that their actions were unseen, but your patience let you see everything with absolute clarity. It wasn't about ignoring them. It was about waiting until the narrative would fully reveal itself. They acted recklessly, thinking your tolerance was weakness, and in doing so, they handed you the very evidence that would undo them. Their arrogance made them careless. They tried to test boundaries they didn't even know existed, thinking time would always be on their side. But patience is a powerful form of awareness. It doesn't bend to impulse or ego. It doesn't react to chaos. Instead, it absorbs, records, and waits for the right moment to activate. Every overreach, every slip, every attempt to provoke a reaction only reinforced the contrast between them and you. Their aggression became self-exposure. When the boundary finally appeared, it wasn't negotiable, it wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't a reaction to provocation. It was the result of deliberate timing and awareness. The world saw the line they had crossed and the consequences that followed. They had been misreading patience for compliance, kindness for vulnerability, and composure for ignorance. They thought they were in control, but the moment they confused your patience with permission, they triggered the very mechanism that would strip them of it. Their miscalculation was absolute. They thought they could play with someone aligned and aware, but instead they became the ones played, and in their overconfidence they revealed everything they tried to hide, leaving them powerless while you remained untouchable, steady, and fully in command of the outcome. Number 10. They tried to drain your light and revealed their dependence on it. They believed they could dim you, take from your energy, and leave you smaller than you were. They assumed that by creating chaos around you, manipulating situations, and feeding off your patience and kindness, they could weaken you. But here's the truth. When you are divinely aligned, your light is not a battery that can be stolen. It isn't finite. It doesn't flicker because someone else tries to snuff it out. And every attempt they made to drain you only revealed their own dependence on what they couldn't generate themselves. They were addicted to your presence, your integrity, your clarity, not because they respected it, but because it made them look better by comparison. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to unsettle you was a reflection of their need to borrow energy from someone stronger than they were. They thrived on the imbalance, believing it gave them control. But the more they tried to siphon from you, the more obvious it became that without your light, their world felt hollow, chaotic, and incomplete. Meanwhile, you were untouched. You didn't allow the drama to infiltrate your center. You maintained alignment, moved with clarity, and let the truth of your energy operate naturally. In doing so, you became a mirror. They could see themselves clearly for the first time, not the image they wanted others to see, but the version of themselves that needed someone else's light to survive. The irony is striking. They thought they could weaken you by feeding off your strength, but all they did was expose how weak they truly were. They couldn't create the same stability, the same calm, the same authority, and the same peace within themselves. Without your light to highlight the contrast, their insufficiency would have stayed hidden. In the end, they didn't just fail to affect you. They lost something much more critical, the illusion of self-sufficiency. They became painfully aware that the energy they tried to take for granted was the one thing they couldn't replicate, manufacture, or control. While they scrambled to recover, you remained whole, radiant, and untouchable, untouched by their attempts and stronger for the exposure they brought to the surface. Number 11. They exposed their own karma by overplaying their hand. They believed they were clever, that every move they made was calculated to get what they wanted without consequence. They thought manipulation, lies, and intimidation could be used indefinitely to bend reality in their favor. The problem is, when someone crosses a divinely guided person, every misstep is amplified. Their overconfidence became a self-made trap, and every action they took added weight to the consequences they refused to see coming. By overplaying their hand, they revealed patterns they thought were hidden. Every lie, every exaggeration, every desperate attempt to cover tracks became a thread in a web that eventually unraveled. People started noticing inconsistencies. Allies began to question motives. Truth, which had been patient and quiet, began to surface naturally, and it exposed not just their tactics, but the moral and spiritual debt they had accumulated over time. Every small miscalculation added up, and their cumulative actions began to define the narrative more than their words ever could. Karma isn't instantaneous, but it's inevitable. When they tried to manipulate, exploit, and control, they didn't just affect you. They activated a chain reaction that revealed who they truly were to everyone watching. They thought they were untouchable because no one could see the full picture yet. But each overreach, each attempt to assert dominance, and each moral compromise created a ripple that caught up to them. They didn't realize that divinely guided people act as mirrors. Their attempts to undermine you reflected everything about themselves: insecurities, greed, cruelty, and dishonesty. The more they acted, the more visible their own flaws became. And those flaws didn't go unnoticed. Every word they spoke, every lie they told, and every effort to control ultimately worked against them, revealing a level of self-destruction they could not hide. In the end, they weren't defeated by you directly. They were undone by the consequences of their own choices, the energy they projected, and the moral weight of actions taken in arrogance. By overplaying their hand, they exposed their own karma, and what they thought was a game of control turned into a reckoning they never anticipated. Their downfall was crafted entirely by themselves. Number 12. They activated protection they didn't believe existed. They assumed that every move they made would go unnoticed, that every manipulation, every lie, every attack would slide through without consequence. They thought the universe had no stake in what they were doing, that their plans could unfold in secrecy and control. What they didn't realize is that some forces operate quietly, invisibly, and with perfect timing. By targeting someone divinely aligned, they unknowingly triggered protection that didn't need to announce itself. It simply rearranged reality around them. This protection wasn't flashy. It didn't come with warnings or dramatic interventions. It worked silently but effectively, making doors close when they needed to stay open, support appear where they had none, and obstacles rise that they couldn't anticipate. Every attempt to control, intimidate, or manipulate collided with invisible boundaries they couldn't see, and each collision left them off balance. The universe doesn't always intervene in ways people recognize. Sometimes it simply shifts outcomes in favor of those who walk with integrity. The irony is devastating. They believed they could dismantle, destabilize, or drain you, but in their efforts, they only revealed how much they depended on circumstances being against you. Every overreach became a marker for how this unseen protection would operate. While they tried to push, control, and dictate, the world quietly conspired to maintain balance, subtly restoring order in ways they couldn't manipulate or challenge. They were blind to the mechanism of this protection because it didn't serve them directly. It served the alignment, the purpose, and the energy of someone who moves in truth and integrity. While they scrambled, frustrated, and panicked, you remained calm, untouched, and steadily advancing. The more they tried to force outcomes, the more their plans crumbled around them, revealing not your power, but the consequences of their misjudgment. In the end, They underestimated forces they couldn't see and couldn't control. They thought they were free to act without consequence, but every attempt to harm you only activated protection they didn't even know existed. And by the time they realized it, the game had shifted completely, silently, invisibly, and irrevocably, leaving them exposed, powerless, and utterly unprepared for the reality they thought they could dominate. Number 13. They thought your silence meant ignorance, not strategy, and paid for it. They assumed that because you didn't immediately speak up, argue, or defend yourself, you weren't aware of what was happening. They thought quietness was a sign of weakness, that patience meant you were unarmed, and that calm equaled ignorance. That assumption was their undoing. What they failed to recognize is that silence can be one of the sharpest tools in existence. It isn't absence. It's a calculated pause that allows observation, analysis, and precise timing to do the work that emotion and chaos cannot. While they were busy acting out, making mistakes, and trying to force reactions, you were cataloging everything. Every word, every contradiction, every attempt to manipulate became data. They spoke freely because they thought you weren't paying attention, revealing intentions, inconsistencies, and vulnerabilities they believed were hidden. With every overstep, they were unknowingly constructing a case against themselves, while your silence preserved clarity and prevented impulsive reactions that could have complicated the situation. The irony is brutal. Silence isn't passive. It's active observation. It's restraint combined with awareness, creating a space where truth emerges naturally and deception collapses on its own. The longer they underestimated you, the clearer the pattern became. Every lie, every overreaction, and every aggressive move highlighted the contrast between their chaos and your composure. They were loud and desperate. You were quiet and deliberate. By the time consequences arrived, it wasn't your voice that did the work. It was the evidence, the patterns, and the reality they built around themselves while assuming you were unaware. Their miscalculation of your silence turned their aggression into exposure. They thought they were controlling the narrative, but silence allowed reality to control it instead. In the end, they paid for underestimating you. They mistook patience for ignorance, observation for passivity, and quiet for compliance. The moment they realized that your silence was strategy, not weakness, it was already too late. Every attempt to manipulate you had become their own undoing, and the truth emerged more powerful than any words you could have spoken. Their failure was crafted entirely by their misunderstanding of the one thing they could never control: your composed awareness. Number 14. They didn't just lose access to you. They lost the version of themselves that could have evolved. In every situation where someone tries to manipulate, control, or harm a divinely guided person, there's more at stake than just the immediate conflict. What they didn't realize is that by targeting you, they weren't just failing to harm you, they were sabotaging their own potential. Every lie, every overreach, every attempt to bend reality to their will wasn't just a miscalculation against you. It was a decision that blocked their own growth. The version of themselves that could have evolved, that could have learned, adapted, and matured, is the very version they forfeited the moment they chose malice over reflection. They had a chance to face the truth, to see their own weaknesses, and to use the experience as a mirror for personal transformation. Instead, they doubled down on fear, control, and ego. They mistook manipulation for strength, deception for intelligence, and aggression for power. By choosing these paths, they locked themselves into patterns of behavior that ensured stagnation. The more they tried to corner you or destabilize your energy, the more they entrenched themselves in old habits, insecurities, and limitations. Meanwhile, you moved forward. Every challenge, every attack, every attempt to derail you became fuel for your clarity, resilience, and self-mastery. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You weren't distracted by the chaos they created because you were busy stepping into the version of yourself that can't be touched by others' attempts to control, manipulate, or undermine. Your growth was inevitable, while theirs became impossible without first confronting the choices they refused to acknowledge. The most brutal part of this dynamic is the permanence of the loss on their side. They didn't just fail in their scheme, they lost the opportunity to evolve into someone capable of higher awareness, integrity, and strength. That potential is gone, replaced by a version of themselves that now bears the weight of exposure, consequences, and missed opportunity. By attacking a divinely guided earth angel, they didn't just fail to win, they forfeited the very chance to become who they might have been, and that loss is irrevocable. Conclusion. When people choose to target a divinely guided soul, they step into a game they don't understand. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to intimidate or control doesn't just fail. It becomes a mirror reflecting their own weaknesses, insecurities, and miscalculations. They think they're in control, but in reality, every push, every overreach, and every effort to break you only strengthens the alignment, clarity, and boundaries of the one they sought to harm. What they mistook for weakness, patience, or silence was never vulnerability. It was awareness, discernment, and quiet strategy. They exposed themselves at every turn. By underestimating restraint, empathy, and composure, they handed over the evidence of their own flaws, while your integrity and alignment became untouchable. Their obsession, aggression, and overplaying of their hand didn't manipulate reality, it exposed it. And through every attempt to dim your light, isolate you, or bend outcomes to their favor, they revealed something far more critical: their own dependence on what they could never create themselves, their own fear, and their own stalled potential. In the end, the story isn't about revenge or retaliation. It's about inevitability. Truth unfolds, integrity stands, boundaries hold, and those who tried to disrupt, manipulate, or diminish you are left facing consequences they never anticipated, not just in the moment, but in the long-term impact on their character and growth. You didn't just survive their attacks, you evolved through them. You activated forces they couldn't see. You maintained your alignment while they revealed their disarray. Their loss wasn't a coincidence. It was the natural outcome of crossing someone who moves with divine guidance, clarity, and purpose. For anyone watching this, remember this: staying true to yourself, standing in your integrity, and holding your energy is far more powerful than any attempt someone else makes to control you. If you found this video insightful and empowering, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss content like this. Hit the like button to show your support, comment below with your thoughts or experiences, and share this video with others who need to understand the power of staying aligned even when others try to pull them down. Your engagement not only spreads awareness, but also strengthens this community of clarity and truth. God bless you, and Happy New Year.